Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I have a forewarning just to make my thoughts as clear as possible. Now yes, I understand what the title and thumbnail may imply, however I must make it abundantly clear that I do not condone Griffith's raping of Casca.
Still a piece of garbage.
The entire Griffith did nothing wrong is just a cringeworthy meme for edgelords, which admittedly Berserk attracts many of. But I think Griffith is still heavily misunderstood by the community as a purely selfish villain lacking humane emotions, when in reality his decision to sacrifice the Hawks was far more complex. Once again, I must make it clear what he did to Casca is unforgivable, regardless of what moral alignment Griffith possessed, and while certain points in this video may seem as I am justifying what he did, please remember I am not encouraging it, I am simply attempting to present an alternative perspective that may differentiate from the status quo. With that being said, let us begin the defense of Griffith. Firstly, we must contextualize the situation to the story rather than holding it accountable to modern social views. The life Griffith led was one of brutal struggle and constant conflict that involved his life being risked in almost every single decision he made. He lived in war. His and everyone who followed him had their home on the battlefield, and whilst he cared for them as a leader, it was ultimately their choice to follow him, something discussed in the Campfire of Dreams chapter, in order to realize a greater purpose in which Griffith envisioned and believed himself to be selected to achieve. In Berserk, it is made obvious to us that good-hearted people are favoured no more than corrupt ones, the way of the world being dominated by the strong, not the good, something that Griffith realised himself growing up as a child in poverty, and this helped shape his views into knowing that to win, at the centre you must be stronger than the opposition. Life is a continuous war. Griffith wanted a kingdom for himself to rule and others to prosper within, and his ambition cannot be accustomed to most. He was destined for greater things, possessing a magnetic charisma that inspired trust and confidence. And when a leader of such an outstanding magnitude, decisions have to be made that can seem impossible. Griffith always succeeded. He was politically astute, a competent warrior, and a tactical prodigy. We can respect Griffith in this sense, as he crafted all of what he had prior to his downfall from meticulous devotion. He organically rose the ranks through his crucial involvement in the 100 Years' War, his overcoming of the nobility who opposed him, and the sense of community he created being the blazing inferno that gave purpose to others. He is admirable in his leadership and general prowess, fighting in a cruel world that offered him no help, and I believe he is truly an example of the power of human nature when determined. However, he did have his weaknesses, as all humans do. Some of Griffith's more darker tendencies reside in his lust for control, mainly over others. This is why Guts' departure crippled him. Someone he believed was devoted to him just simply left. This began the cataclysmic chain of events as Griffith, in an effort to reclaim the control he felt as though he lost, slept with Charlotte. Whilst usually emotionally calm, as he felt superior to most, Guts was special and therefore desirable to Griffith, as he did not worship him in the same sense as his other followers, making Griffith feel inadequate. His defeat in the duel and him leaving sparked that spiraling nature in Griffith, as he simply didn't know how to deal with the betrayal as he saw it. Whilst ultimately Griffith did make the mistake, Guts can be seen as the catalyst, as he made Griffith forget his ambitions. I still don't know if love is an appropriate word for how Griffith saw Guts, but it is without question that he was obsessed with him. Yes, Griffith had flaws, but his flaws were also the source of his success. His cruelty at times would cause someone else to fail. In the life he led, he had to maintain that dominance, and unfortunately, righteous people won't win in a realistic setting. To detach himself from human emotions by freezing his blood meant that Griffith could pursue his dream no longer bound to the weaknesses he had prior. While some consider Guts' resilience not to rely on bought power as a strength, others may see it as futile, as his journey has provided no comfort, no success, and as of right now, failure. However, Griffith's so-called weakness, caving into his selfish desires, has allowed him to achieve his dream and continue soaring further. Try to put into perspective what a year's worth of torture can do to someone. No rest for a year, constantly burnt, whipped, mauled, pierced, mocked, whilst on the bare minimum to maintain life. With no distractions from the pain, Griffith was consumed by his emotions towards Guts, growing hateful. He felt abandoned and therefore spiteful towards Guts. What he did to Casca was purely the most effective way of revenge, establishing control through dominance in the most animalistic manner possible. The torture Griffith went through is some of the most brutally depicted in fiction I've ever seen, physically crippling him forevermore before the God Hand presented a way out. His mentality was no doubt altered during this time as well, something that we can see in his hopelessness attempting to commit suicide while laughing maniacally. Griffith was broken in that dungeon, his pain immeasurable, and seeing no way out chose death. We have to remember that Griffith was no longer that charismatic enigma, but at his lowest point, literally everything was lost. He could no longer move, fight, speak. Many of the Hawks had been killed or left, mentally drained and branded villains to the crown. All of this simmered in Griffith's mind over the year, and this can damage a person massively, yet also makes gaining it all back even more alluring. The question that I battle with most often is if Femto was the true reflection within Griffith, or if that demonic presence was only born during and after his torture, making him that monster. Sure, Griffith exhibits psychotic tendencies such as emotional manipulation and lack of empathy throughout the Golden Age. However, he also shows very realistic signs of PTSD, sadness, self-loathing, and regret. Whilst it is true that Griffith had the ability to be dark, his ambiguous morality kept him in check for the most part. However, during the torture it simply cracked, and with the manipulation of the God Hand, forced his judgment to become clouded. The visions Griffith was shown depicted how his path had already been flooded with the corpses of his allies, people who had laid down their lives for his dream, and it would be pointless to give up now as it meant they died in vain. In his eyes he must continue and not betray his dream, no matter what he must do to achieve it. He was whittled down to his lowest and forced to choose the death of the dream or return stronger and more capable than ever before. We as readers simply cannot relate to being driven to this extremity. I'd be happy to wager most have not suffered what Griffith suffered, and therefore judging him for choosing his own prosperity over the Hawks cannot be criticised so heavily in my opinion. In Griffith's eyes, the Hawks were already pawns for him to use to achieve something, all prepared to die by his command already, so sacrificing them can be seen as the ultimate fulfillment to his dream. What sprouted from the sacrifice of the Hawks can be seen as possibly a betterment for humanity. From a utilitarian viewpoint, it can be possible to claim Griffith made a deeply unethical decision that resulted, however, in the prosperity of others. From a quick scan of the internet, it seems roughly 4,000 men were subject to his sacrifice, however, eventually born from that came the utopia named Falconia. I mentioned earlier that Berserk is set in a war-struck world that experiences conflict on the daily. However, Falconia was created to provide refuge, safety from these things. Griffith, in his reborn state, has such a godly influence upon man and demon on the world that he can make real change that can be seen for the greater good. The population of Falconia is roughly estimated to be 200,000, with growing numbers each day, and everyone lives in harmonic peace with healthy living. Us readers alongside Rickett and Guts know the price that was paid, and it therefore makes sense for us to harbour negative emotions towards Griffith. However, it is undeniable to say that progress has been made thanks to the sacrifice. Ultimately, it boils down to personal opinion on the means to the end. As me personally, I believe that the people Griffith has saved due to his gain of power justifies what he did to the band. However, he is still a bad person. This does not mean he isn't selfish and twisted, however he has made progressive change in taming the world as the new king, under one banner. The current Griffith is not exhibited inherently cruel actions, or at least I haven't received any malicious implications from the actions which he takes. He moves forwards pragmatically, achieving his goal whilst also bringing peace to war-torn areas, such as defeating the Kushans, and then accepting them into his army. He isn't taking sick pleasure in what he does, such as when he rapes Casca, as he has transcended further than that now. Whilst it is without question that Griffith had sadistic tendencies and immoral ethics, I believe we must find some level of sympathy for what he suffered during his torture, alongside the incredibly strong manipulation by a literal otherworldly force. Griffith was always destined to become the Hawk of Darkness, as ordained by the flow of causality, and therefore it being his own will to sacrifice the Hawks becomes slightly more artificial. My overall point is that whilst Griffith certainly made decisions that deserves criticism or outright hatred, I feel people are too quick to judge him being purely evil when he was a very mentally damaged person, especially after the torture he received. He is more of a victim of the world of Berserk, and whilst he is reveling in his current state, eventually he will be swallowed back up by the world. But as of right now, he is providing a utopian life to others, and sure, he does need validation from others to fuel his ego, but there are still positive aspects to his rule, and I personally believe that to be successful in life you must be selfish, obviously to a less extreme level. Anyways, that wraps up everything I wanted to say about Griffith and his decisions. At the end of the day, he's a brilliantly crafted antagonist with deeply complex themes surrounding fate and humanity, and I am buzzing to see where the story heads next, with the confirmation of that Berserk will be returning with Volume 42 sometime late September. That's all from me. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, it would be much appreciated, and I'll catch you in the next one.
And I walk to the money.
Damn.
You know what I'm saying? Money on my watch. I mean, time is money. Money on my phone. I mean, I talk to the money. Money on my chain. I mean, the money hang with me.
Already.
Money on my hat. That mean money on my mind. Money on my gray bandana. That mean the money on my mind. Money on my Kool-Aid. That mean my money sweet.
Oh yeah, G. What is on your shade for?
Shades. That mean I see the money. You heard? I just thugging. You feel me? Just